A history of the Tower of London from its earliest Saxon and Roman beginnings right up until the current day. Hope you all enjoy this one. Tower of London from its earliest beginnings until the current day. A lot of evidence shows that there's been activity on the site for many years from Saxon and Roman times, and that's how we're seeing the tower, or the area of the tower, in its earliest phase now, in the Iron Age. Here we're seeing it in the Roman period. This site would have been on the eastern edge of the walled city of Roman Londinium, and part of the wall still remains today. And we're reminded of this today by road names like London Wall, place names like Aldgate, Cripplegate, Newgate and Ludgate. The Romans were very technologically advanced, and they built a massive infrastructure of roads, what we're seeing here, the walls, and what we're seeing here now. And the fortifications that we're looking at here would have remained a big thing and led on into what the tower would later become, a fortified place, which it's been for a very long time. Here we're seeing it in a state of disrepair towards the end of the Roman era. This would have fell into the favour of William the Conqueror, who we're going to be talking about now and seeing now. Soon as William achieved victory at Hastings and had taken the country, building work began more or less immediately on the tower, which was the White Tower. And the first version of his tower was believed to be a timber structure tower built on a mount which was known as a motte and bailey, and that was the earliest incarnation of the tower. William knew that he had to fortify London to subdue any rebellious uprisings and things like that. And the wooden structure was quickly replaced by a stone one. The Norman monk Gandalf, who was Bishop of Rochester, was charged with building the tower, or designing it. And the labour force, unfortunately, was made up of the conquered people. And we're seeing it in its building phases now, with the city of London over to the left. The castle was being built as a defensive structure, also a place for the royal family to live and stay, to house troops, also a place to worship. The Chapel of St. John, which we're seeing here, is one of the oldest working chapels in London, or possibly the oldest one. William built his tower on a hill so it would be visible for miles around, and it was a mark of subjugation to the people, a reminder and a warning. There was a new world order. We're the Normans, and we're here to bastard well stay. William didn't live long enough to see his tower finished, and they don't think it was completely finished until the end of the next reign, William II, also known as William Rufus. In the reign of the brother of William Rufus, Henry I, the tower then became darker, become known as a prisoner, which is what it would be for a long time, a place of torture. We're seeing the Norman Tower here. Ranulph Flambard, He was a bishop, and he was a very, very clever man, and he was imprisoned. He was imprisoned here, and he was the first person to ever escape. He did that by getting his jailers drunk, hosting a little party, having a barrel brought in. In one of the barrels was a rope coiled up. When everyone was drunk or possibly drugged, he got out. He escaped. Ranald Flambath wasn't the last person to escape. So it didn't have a complete success rate. Here we're seeing the tower in the reign of King John, Bad King John, or King John the Worst as he's sometimes known. Here you can see the opening that goes straight out into the river. This would later become known as Traitor's Gate. See here, in the reign of Henry III, the reigns of King Edward, the curtain walls are being built, and the opening has been filled in, and you can't access it now. A new moat was being built in the reign of Henry III, is how we're seeing it now. More fortifications, a moat, but unfortunately King Henry's moat didn't account for the fact that the Thames was a tidal river. So when the tide went out, the moat in low tide was at best a muddy puddle. Henry III corrected this problem by adding a sluice gate, so when the tide come in, they'd let it in. When the tide come out, they shut the gate, and the moat would stay filled. At the time, this was England's most fortified and concentric castle, a real impregnable place. Right at the front, look, is the water gate, what would later become known as Traitor's Gate. These were the royal apartments, or believed to be the royal apartments, of King Edward and King Henry, where the arrow is pointing now. But conjecture says that this may not have been the best place for a royal to live, so that's a bit of conjecture with that one. What it was more likely used was a place for the king to move into the tower and out of the tower by river without being accosted by petitioners, beggars, people desperate for the king's attention. Although they lived in a pretty grim age, they did try to make sure that luxury was still possible, and we're seeing a reconstruction of the king's medieval bedchamber here. Anyone that's watched my Tower of London lives will remember this, and they've reconstructed it using materials that would have been found in those days. We're seeing the tower at a later time now, where the stars have appeared. There was a royal apartments built. We're going on to the reign of King Henry VIII. The tower had a lot of work done in it at the time for the coronation of Queen Anne Boleyn. She wasn't very popular. Henry VIII wanted her to be accepted and loved, so he put on a lot of pomp and ceremony. And it was in the reign of King Henry VIII that we lose the pointy tops on the White Tower and replaced with onion top domes or cupolas. That was specifically done for the coronation of Queen Anne. Many of these buildings that you see in here now are gone, unfortunately. So Anne's coronation, but not very long later she would be back in the royal lodgings awaiting her trial, and we all know how that ended. Once tried, she returned to the lodgings awaited her execution and never left the tower again. The tower's most gruesome reputation, or reputation for gruesomeness, occurred during the reign of Henry VIII because of all the wickedness that did go on there. And now we're seeing the tower in Henry VIII's reign. Don't forget as well that the tower wasn't just a prison and a home, it was also the home of the Royal Mint. Henry VIII debased the coinage in his time. He couldn't resist it. He just couldn't resist nicking that little bit of extra gold or silver content. And that, in his reign, he became known as Old Copper Nose, because the silver coins, the layer of silver on top would wear away, leaving the copper below, and hence Old Copper Nose. Here we're seeing Tower Wolf. This was built up, made more to what we know it as during the reign of Henry VIII. Before Henry VIII, Traitor's Gate was called the Watergate or the King's Gate. But because of what happened in the reign of Henry VIII, we know it as Traitor's Gate. Now we're seeing the tower in the reign of King William of Orange. Later times, 1600s, 1700s. In the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, the tower had fallen into dilapidation and disrepair. And Elizabeth failed to maintain the upkeep of the tower. And when you think about what happened to her mother there, it's not hard to see why, really, is it? She probably didn't want to think about it. And also, she was imprisoned there herself by her sister Queen Mary, Bloody Mary. And it's believed that she may have even been imprisoned in the very rooms that her own mother, Queen Anne Boleyn, had been imprisoned in. So, not a happy place. She funded the upkeep and the maintenance of the exterior walls, but for the general structure of it, it didn't get much spent on it. But Queen Elizabeth I was a particularly parsimonious woman. She was a bit mean. She was mean. Didn't like spending. In 1831, the smoke that you can see in the far corner there destroyed many of the original buildings. This would later become the site of the Waterloo Block, which is now the jewel house of the Tower of London. So there's always changing in the tower. Nothing has ever stayed the same. In addition to the fire at the Tower of London, in the 19th century, another era came to an end, and that was the Royal Menagerie. There'd been a Royal Menagerie at the Tower since medieval times, and it was under the governorship of the Duke of Wellington, who was Constable of the Tower, that the menagerie was sent packing, and that's what we're looking at here. It's an artist impression of the move taking place. Over the centuries, basically the animals that had made their way into the menagerie had come as gifts from foreign kings and ambassadors and things like that. And the kings couldn't turn these gifts down. And when they got them, they probably thought, where the hell are we going to put these? So why not the most secure place in the land, which was the Tower of London? So, yeah, it must have been fun for the yeoman warders. There were lions, tigers, elephants, exotic birds, everything that you can think of. A polar bear even that used to be allowed out into the Thames onto a chain. Do excuse that, that's a charming clock. And the Londoners like to see that one. Now we're seeing a wire mesh recreation of the Tower Elephant. Now we're seeing the tower at a later time, Victorian era, and just look how busy the Thames is. Absolutely packed with boats, because don't forget, on the opposite side of the river was the docks, and this was a vein and artery of commerce. Everything that we made or that we needed was either bought in or sent out through the docks, and it was a real shit of a job to try and cross the Thames because of all the traffic, which you can see. Now we're seeing the tower more towards the Victorian reign. Queen Victoria paid quite a lot of interest in the tower, and there was quite a lot of renovations and stuff done in her reign. It was in Queen Victoria's reign that the chapel of St Peter ad Vincula, after being visited by Queen Victoria, she complained that the floor was in such a terrible state and the chapel itself was in a bad state, and gave orders that it should be repaired, which it was. But in that process, they found over, I think it was 1,500 skeletons buried under the floor in the graveyard outside, and that among those skeletons were believed to be Anne Boleyn, her brother George Boleyn, and yeah, it's a lot of people. Now we're seeing the tower in the Second World War. It took several hits. It's the only time that the ceremony of the keys, which is a ceremony specific to the Tower of London, has ever been interrupted, was during the Blitz because of a direct hit. I think it was interrupted for about 15 minutes. The men sorted things out and then got back on with it. And the fella in charge of doing it wrote to the king, apologised and offered his resignation. And the king wrote back that there was no need for an apology, and certainly no need for an offer of resignation, as it was down to enemy action and was quite understandable. And the king commended the men for carrying on and finishing off the ceremony of the keys. That might be something you're interested in, the ceremony of the keys. You can look that up online. How the tower survived the war, really don't know. Now you're seeing the tower as we all recognise it today. This image does date from 1999, so it's a little bit older, but it is exactly as we would recognise it. Don't forget, it's had a lot of lives and done a lot of things over the years. It's been a prison, it's been a palace, it's now the home of the Crown Jewels. It's still a military fortress. The guards are not just there for prettiness, they do serve a purpose. Both the yeoman warders and the guards. Over in the corner, well, where the jewel house is, there are guards there and they are armed. So yeah. Interestingly enough, the moat is for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They've dug the moat up, taken all the grass out of it, and they're going to be planting a wildflower meadow in there, and you can slide down that on a slide into the wildflower meadow kind of thing as part of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations. I hope you've all enjoyed this. I think I've pretty much covered everything for the tower from its earliest beginnings up until where we are now today. Sorry for my umming and ahhing and stopping and starting. It's not that easy to put these videos together, I must admit. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like and a share. And the next part of our video now is we're going to move over to an imagining of what the more affluent part of Norman London would have been like. Say like the merchants areas and where the people had money. That's an animation, so we'll move on to that now. That's a silent one, so hope you all enjoy it. If you did enjoy this, please give it a like and a share. Take care all, and thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the tour. If you did, please give it a like and a share. Thanks very much for watching. See you all again soon.